Well, hello there and welcome. My name is Kylie Patchett and I'm your host, and welcome to the Wild and Finally Fucking Free podcast. This show is all about sharing the real and raw stories from women who have undergone midlife metamorphosis, taken a leap of faith, or broken the ties that bind them in patterns of staying stuck, small, and like their needs don't matter. You see, I believe that the years leading up to and during menopause are a rite of passage, a deep invitation after so many years of giving our time, attention, and energy to others to carve out the same time, energy, and attention in ourselves, in our health, our love, our connection, our vitality, our purpose, our real needs and deep desires. You know, those ones lying dormant underneath all the duty, responsibility, pushing, striving, and achieving of our 20s and 30s? You see, at this stage in our lives, we find ourselves shifting identity potentially, no longer caring as much what other people think, and left wondering why on earth we have not given ourselves permission to do life in the way we truly want to. In this show, I speak to the women brave enough to truth talk their own midlife shedding skin stories, and the healers and helpers who help them transition through these crossroads of change. This is the midlife magic you didn't even know you needed, and I am so freaking glad you found us. Let's dive in. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 2023. This is Kylie. This is my first solo ep for this year. It feels like a long time since I've spoken to you. We're going to do something a little bit different with this solo ep. So welcome. Usually I would pose a question to you, a high quality question in a solo episode. But today I'm going to share a little bit of the behind the scenes of my personal journey over the perimenopause roller coaster, I'm going to call it, over the last few months. And it does feel vulnerable, to be perfectly honest. I have given myself some pause to really feel into, is this the right time to be sharing this? And I deeply, deeply believe that sharing our stories and being honest with how much this rite of passage can feel like we are being forced through the eye of a needle. For some of us, it's really important to be honest and to be clear with ourselves about the fact that none of the things that change in perimenopause are, because we're not coping anymore, or not as good at our jobs, or not as mentally stable as what we once were. It's more about finding I believe, a gentler, more self-compassionate view of things. So it was interesting. I've been diving into some research to create this amazing back to basics self-care guide, which started out as a 10-page basic guide as a free gift to you, my community, to help you understand what to expect and some of the things to be kind of on the lookout for. And this guide has become a 55-page and probably growing, if I'm honest with myself, guide. It's available on the website. There'll be links in the show notes. So if you just follow from kyliepatchett.com.au, you will find it. But this is kind of the story of why I've been writing that guide. So when I was doing this research, I was speaking to a friend of mine who is, I don't actually even know, probably about 10 years younger than me, so in her late 30s. And I was saying to her, do you know, symptoms can show up as early as our late 30s. Did you know that the suicide rates in women 45 to 55 is the largest growing group of suicide statistics in Australia? Did you know that these common symptoms can often be misdiagnosed or completely missed because we just think that, we're getting tired or we're getting moody from life in general? And she actually said to me, I am so scared about perimenopause. My sisters have mentioned it as in, oh, it's horrible and, it's a big sort of trying time. But it kind of feels to me a little bit like childbirth. Like no one actually said to me before I had my babies that this first 6 to 8 weeks in particular was going to be really, really hard yards. And her kind of view of things was she feels like perimenopause may be just the same. It may be one of these things that all women go through, but we're just not talking about how much it can buffer ourselves in terms of our identity, our feelings about ourselves, our ability to cope with the world. And that made me even more sure that I was going to share this story. So if you're listening to this and you aren't, or you haven't identified you're in perimenopause yet, I think this is a perfect time to be hearing something like this, because I believe if I was a bit better armed and forewarned, that some of the symptoms that I've been really struggling with wouldn't have been such a shock. I feel like I was blindsided. And if you're in perimenopause, or maybe you're out the other side, and bless you, I would love to talk to you on the podcast, because I think we need to tell those stories too, that life gets better, that our energy does return for most of us. Our sex lives get better. Our creativity abounds. Our deep calling and our connection to life feels bigger and more splendid, and all of those things. If you're like me and you're somewhere in the messy, magical middle, first of all, I want to say, walking right alongside you, sister. And yeah, here's a little bit about what's been happening for me. So I feel that it is quite amusing that I am a biologist. And when I first experienced some of the symptoms of perimenopause, I was completely blindsided. Now, my mum and I don't talk about this stuff. I'm pretty sure that my mum went into surgical menopause, and I'm not even really sure about that. It's not something that we've even talked about. So I feel like I haven't spoken to those people on my mother line. I don't know what their experience has been, which can form some idea of what we may expect. Although, having said that, I think it's really, really important for all of us to understand that every single woman's experience of perimenopause is different. Now, there's obvious differences, like someone who has been pushed into premature menopause because of surgery or medical intervention. Absolutely. And their menopause can be even more difficult to deal with, because a lot of the symptoms can be a lot more pronounced and life-altering. Something that I read the other day on endocrinologist Jean Hale's site, and I highly recommend that site if you haven't been on the Jean Hale's for Women's Health site, and you feel like you're not as well informed about perimenopause or even other areas of women's health. Super, 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 super good site. So this is what she says. She says, not all women experience the same menopausal symptoms. 20% of women have no symptoms, 60% experience mild to moderate symptoms, and 20% have symptoms so severe that they significantly interfere with daily life. So when you're listening to my story, this is just my story. But please, 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 if you are struggling or buffeting around, start sharing with your friends. If you've got close relationships with female relatives, start talking to them. And please seek medical advice if you are having any issues with, being worried about your periods, or if your symptoms are affecting your ability to enjoy normal activities or interrupting, sleep or work or your relationships. Please seek some professional advice. There's no need to go through this stage in our lives by ourselves without support. So can you hear that I'm procrastinating telling you about my story? Okay. So yes, I'm a biologist. I was blindsided. The first things that showed up for me, which I've spoken about in this podcast before, is that I, all of a sudden, after I turned 47, which is a year and 2 weeks ago, I started to have these swings of mood. I went from someone who was, relatively stable in mood. I didn't ever get too bad PMT. I might, find myself a bit snippy, and then the next day I'd start my bleed and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's why I was feeling a bit, irritable. That's about as much as what I've ever struggled with. And I do have close family relatives that struggle with severe endometriosis. So again, honouring the fact that that's just my reproductive years experience and it isn't everyone's. But for me, I really didn't have much to talk about during my reproductive years. A pretty regular cycle, not many issues. And then all of a sudden, when I turned 47, I started to get these swings from rage, like I'm going to rip your face off, to I'm crying and I don't know why, and then back again. And it was really discombobulating. And because I've got, a strong mental health issue history in my family, my immediate thought was, oh my God, my mental health, something is really, really wrong with me in terms of my mental health. I did end up doing a lot of reading at that time. I started, finally kind of turned my attention to, oh, hang on a minute, I have just turned 47. I wonder if it's this perimenopause thing that they've been talking about. And again, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that I really didn't know what to expect. I hadn't read anything about perimenopause. And then my beautiful friend Sonia Lovell started her Dear Menopause podcast. So I started listening to that, listening to the different stories, listening to the different experts. And I'm like, whoa, okay, this is not just something that you necessarily sail through. So I did get much more educated about what to expect. And I have chosen myself with the support of, and I honour the fact that I have the privilege of having a support circle of professionals around me and also friends that I talk to about this. And I'm actually quite blessed to have friends, a few good friends that are post-menopausal. And so I'm now looking back, they're sort of like 52 to 54. And I'm now looking back and going, oh, that's why life was so hard for them back then. That's why they were struggling with things that they used to be able to juggle easily. That's why, there was sleep issues. That's why they put on a little bit more kind of curve and didn't feel like their body felt the same as what it usually had. So there's a blessing in that. I also have a really beautiful older lady doctor, Dr. Shirley, shout out Dr. Shirley. And Dr. Shirley's really, really helped me in terms of me being able to advocate for what I would like to try in my own support and treatment. I also just had started working with a naturopath that specialises in perimenopause and menopause support and actually women's health. And also has experience in eating disorder recovery, which is part of my journey. So that's been quite a find. It's like finding a unicorn. And I've also had the absolute blessing last year of starting to work with a narrative psychologist who has really, really helped me to unravel some childhood stuff. So I've been swimming along quite well. My personal experience is that I've definitely noticed a change in my body composition. I've definitely noticed a change in my energy. My mood swings a year ago were really helped by making some clear decisions on what I was and was not available for in terms of, I left my work that was very stressful. I really concentrated on the quality of my relationships, and I really became aware of some relationships that were at too great a cost, and I've let those relationships go. And I had decided to start using progesterone in the second half of my cycle. So, and I should say this is the caveat of the fact that I am not a medical professional, and this is my personal experience. This is not saying that progesterone works for every single person. In my experience, it really helped with the mood swings that I was experiencing a year ago, which tended to be for about the 7 days before my bleed. So kind of, I guess you could say, a little bit like premenstrual tension, but just much stronger. And that can be one of the things that perimenopause brings. So, hey gorgeous, we interrupt this gold for a delicious invitation. If your whole body has been whispering more lately, more voice, more truth, more satisfaction, more clients of the soulmate variety, more cash, more you, then this invitation is for you. Potent, my sister mind is officially open. This is my high touch, holy fuck, I'm ready sister mind for rebels in good girl clothing who are done outsourcing their power and diluting their magic to fit into someone else's business formula. If you have been craving a space where your strategy, your voice, and your energy all get to be offered, honored, refined, and amplified, this is it. Inside of Potent, you will get my eyes on your business every single week, copy mentoring, and that is for brand copy and content storytelling that turns your truth into client catnip, energetic recalibration that helps you unhook old learned limitation patterns, keeping you quiet, not being seen, not being heard, real-time, high-touch, one-on-one coaching that actually sees the bigness of your vision, and the kind of sisterhood that does not flinch when you show up in your full, messy, brilliant, phoenix rising from the ashes glory. This isn't surface level support. It's deep, potent, paradigm shifting work that changes who you are as a woman in business and a woman in life. We start in August. Early open access is open right now. For the month of June 2025, inside of this early access open doors period, you will receive juicy bonuses, extended payment plans, and access immediately to my entire library of storytelling gold. You'll find all the juicy details at kyliepatchett.com/potent. And we fill spaces, and there's only 10 of them, and more than likely only 5 by the time you listen to this, because by that time I will have offered them to the existing cohort, the beautiful original OG circle. We do actually take applications on a first come, first served basis. So come and apply, and let's get back to the magic of the episode. What I have found lately is that I have really, really struggled with, I actually said to a friend the other day, I feel like I just fell off the self-confidence cliff. And it actually did feel like this. I was sort of going along swimmingly. And then a few weeks ago, I just felt like, I don't know, all of the things that I felt were solid ground, like my trust in myself, my fairly even mood and energy, my commitment to building a business, my love of my family, like all of those things, all of a sudden I doubted every single one of them. And it was absolutely horrendous. It was really, 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 really horrendous. I did spend a few days where I actually stayed in bed and cried for most of those days. It happened to coincide with my family mostly being, well, all of them were away during this period. And so it just felt like there was a culmination of life events, but also this really, really deep, dive into the valley of self-doubt. What also happened at the same time, and this is something that I really want to address in this podcast, is stress and trauma and the role on how you may experience perimenopause. At the same time, because I've been doing a lot of healing work, I found for a period of at least 2 weeks where I was in extremely deep emotional pain. There was a lot of things coming to the surface for me from childhood, a lot of things that I felt I was grieving. I'm not going to go into too many details, but it was definitely around, how can I best describe it? Around feeling, the word that was coming to me when I was in my deepest, darkest hole of a place was unimportant. And it's a funny thing, language, isn't it? Because I've never, ever felt that I'm unimportant. But that was what was coming to the surface. And when I say coming to the surface, I mean racking sobs of feeling the truth of feeling unimportant. Funnily enough, this happened around my birthday and through different circumstances. Unfortunately, my firefighting hubby was not around for my birthday. So there was colors of, it's my birthday and blah, blah, blah. But it really, if I'm honest, was a deep bubble of a wounded inner child rising to the surface. And although it was painful at the time, I had a beautiful, beautiful experience of truly letting myself sit in deep, dark, painful emotion and allowing the wounded part of me to actually be reparented by my current 48-year-old self. And there's beauty in that. And I see that all the time when I'm in healing sessions with clients. And I feel like that is exactly why I do the work that I do in the world, because I understand what it is like to be tethered to stories from childhood and pain from childhood that are not in alignment with the calm and the joy and the freedom and the beauty that you would like in your life. And I also am a living, breathing example of a continual evolution to being courageous enough to sit in the fire of heavy, horrible emotions, and also to come out the other side with all of the non-truth of myself burnt away. And I feel like that is one of the most beautiful gifts of this perimenopause journey. And there's no science behind this. This is just my really strong internal heart and gut feeling that perimenopause is literally like standing in the fire, and we have an invitation to burn away what is not the truth of us. And one of the things for me that's not the truth of me is that I'm not unimportant. I am so loved and so supported, and I have deep connections, and I contribute to the world. And all of the things that little, I would say she was probably 4 years old, the little part of me I was dealing with that day or re-nurturing, she doesn't know that I'm 48. And I literally sat and imagined zooming down the timeline of my life and retrieving her and showing her all the beauty of right now. This gorgeous man that I'm just about to have my 27th first date anniversary with on the 25th of February. And these beautiful humans, these beautiful daughters that chose us as their parents, and the gorgeous space that I live in, my beautiful, simple little country cottage that feels safe and secure, and my life, which is becoming more and more and more what I always desired for myself. And yet the things that can bubble to the surface when we're in the fire of perimenopause are, the painful untruths. I actually, when I was writing this guide, found this quote from Gabriel Mate. I'm not sure how to say his name, and I apologize if I've just murdered that. But he does a lot of work around trauma and addiction, and how trauma is the gateway to addiction. And this quote really, really hit me behind the eyeballs. It says, "Being cut off from your natural self-compassion So in other words, being stuck in the story of unimportant or not loved, not belonging, not good enough is one of the greatest impairments we can suffer, along with our ability to feel our own pain, go our best hopes for healing, dignity, and love. Whew. Can you feel that? Oh my goodness, that feels so true in my chest. So true. So when we feel into, I'm going to say the rite of passage, because I really do feel like we're at an initiation point. When we have our feet in the fire, we have no doubt in perimenopause, for most of us, a decreased ability to deal with stress. And a lot of the time when I'm working with a client or I'm speaking with a friend or in my own experience, we can feel that we don't have the emotional strength or bandwidth to wear the masks anymore or to push down the pain from the past. And by masks, I mean, trying to fulfill the roles of the good girl or the people pleaser or the caretaker or whatever sticky note label you were stuck with as a child. I'll have to do a podcast ep on that. And although in our earlier years, in our 20s and 30s, we may have been able to keep the pain from the past kind of down underneath the surface, the thing that can happen and does often happen is that deep emotional pain from our childhood or traumatic events, which we have spent a lifetime pushing down. My pushing down mechanism was food. Other people's is busyness, drugs, alcohol, whatever. A lot of the clients I work with have a deep fear that if they open up that pain from the past, that it's like a Pandora's box and they may not be able to handle the emotion. But the thing is, when we have our lowered emotional bandwidth, or for those of us who have our lowered emotional bandwidth, we can start to feel the impacts of not dealing with that past stuff. So for instance, when I said to you, I was filled with rage at one stage, the reason why I started working with a psychologist was when I felt that wild rage come to the surface. When we unraveled it, it felt very much like unexpressed anger. And if you feel into a childhood where you have taken care of a parent who was not able to take care of themselves, and that's my personal experience, your breed of childhood pain or limitation may be different, and you may well not associate with being someone who has trauma or childhood pain, which is a totally valid experience. I'm not saying all of us do. I'm saying that for the majority of people I work with, because I do help people release stories from the past, that the feeling of being unseen or unheard or having our needs not met is something that does need to be processed. And I'll tell you why from my personal experience. I did not want to be stuck here in 2022 or 2023, still dealing with shit that happened in 1980. I don't want to react to my girls and to my husband and to my friends in a way that is dictated by the things I learnt about myself and the world back then. Because when we're being imprinted between 0 and 7, we're making decisions with a child's resources. So you can imagine if you've got a 5-year-old in your life that you can bring to mind, would you expect them to be able to deal with trauma, or a parent that can't see or hear them, or anything else that's really difficult without an adult to walk them through it? Of course you wouldn't. So why do we expect that we can carry that pain and be okay in the here and now? Now, I will always say that dealing with emotional pain can feel very threatening. And I honor that, and you need to, for you to decide that you want to deal with that, or to have the skills to be able to hold yourself in that place. you need to practice self-responsibility. So self-responsibility looks like, do I want to deal with this? And if I do want to deal with this, is it something I can deal with myself? Is it something I can deal with through a trusted friend, or do I need to seek professional help? For me, for my experience, for the depth of the stuff that I'm working on, I definitely knew that even though, very skilled in helping other people through painful things, it's more difficult to do for yourself because you're not objective and you can't see patterns so easily when you live inside of your own head. So if you are like me, finding that perimenopause is allowing stuff to bobble to the surface, which is uncomfortable, and you feel like it's time to deal with it, please seek professional support. I would also like to bring out from my personal experience that although I was in deep emotional pain for a couple of weeks, and it really, really buffeted my sense of self, and I had a conversation with a friend where I was like, I don't know what's happening to me. I'm losing myself. I don't know what's happening to me. I felt very, very, very uncomfortable. But here's the thing. What I decided to do at that stage, so I did my own healing work. I worked with my psychologist. I went and hired this naturopath. And I also spoke to my doctor. I went to her about something different, and I just mentioned to her how much I was struggling. And all of them reiterated to me that the ways that we can best support ourselves, no matter what we're going through, including perimenopause, is simple things like making sure we have enough sleep, eating well, having time out in nature, making sure that we're not overscheduling ourselves, moving our bodies. And I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is all feeling very familiar. So you may be new to me, or you may have known me for a very long time. But for those of you who don't know, about 10 years ago, I wrote a book. And it's called Stand Tall. The Tall Poppy it's a very long title. The Tall Poppy Project, Stand Tall and Stake a Claim on Your Delicious Life. And my version of a delicious life is a life that feels like it nourishes you, mind, body, and soul. And funnily enough, I'd just given a good friend of mine a copy of it. She said, I didn't know you'd written a book. Could I have a copy of it? And she's going through some curly stuff at the moment. And she'd read the first few chapters, and I happened to see her at the coffee shop just as I was going through this dark night of the soul. She's like, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking maybe the author of this book might need to reread her own wisdom. And I was like, could be something in that. So I get this book out, and it's all about the 7 principles of what I used to call in those days radical self-respect. It's a funny thing when you read what you've written as a completely oblivious to perimenopause 30-something-year-old. It's 2012, so I would have been 37. So completely oblivious to what was around the corner in terms of this change of life. And I look at those principles, and you know what? They're basic human needs. They're basic human needs. And when I was able to start walking my way out of the valley of self-doubt with help from, friends and this circle of support that I've got around me, I actually had a face palm moment where I was like, oh my God, I haven't been prioritizing sleep. I've been working on a big project, so I haven't spent much time with friends. I haven't had any time playing. It's fire season, so two out of 3 of the other parts of my family are pretty much on fire grounds almost every day at the moment. We have horrible fires here, and just sending so much love to the people around Tara and Miles at the moment in Western Queensland. Just made myself upset. So connection with my family has been missing. So all of these key fundamentals that I speak about in that first book, I hadn't been paid attention to. So I decided to do something a little bit I don't know. I just decided, you know what, Kylie, stop stuffing around with this perimenopause ride. We know that symptoms of perimenopause, and in the guide that I'll link to at the end of this, I've gone into much more detail and much more science behind the changes that happen. But basically, as we enter perimenopause, estrogen and progesterone start to decline. Progesterone tends to decline in a reasonably stable or reasonably linear way. Estrogen, however, goes on this roller coaster of up and downs, but in a downward trajectory. And it's those changing hormones that can create some of the most common perimenopause symptoms. So when I look back at my dark night of the soul, I was, and this is a symptoms list that's in this guide, I was not getting enough sleep, having difficulty concentrating, experiencing brain fog, experiencing anxiety, feeling irritable, feeling like I wasn't able to cope, having increased PMS, and mood swings or mood changes. So I was ticking all those things off the box. And what I have realized is that I didn't have my basic human needs met. Now, I'm not for 1 minute saying that taking care of your basic human needs will prevent perimenopause symptoms, because that would be ridiculous and completely inaccurate. What I am saying is that reintroducing and committing to these self-care anchors has really made a difference to how impacted I am. And I'm very aware that this is early days. So who knows whether there's a big cliff of confidence to fall off again for me, or, a dark night of anxiety and emotional pain. And I'm sure there will be. I'm sure that part of this roller coaster is that you'll go in and out, in and out, in and out, as your body recalibrates for perimenopause. So what I decided to do is to take the principles from that first book and create a guide for me and for you. And it's called Stand Tall and Stake a Claim on Your Delicious Midlife. So it's all about back to basics self-care for perimenopause and beyond. It covers everything from what to expect in perimenopause, what each of our hormones actually do in our body, when you can expect these things to turn up if they do. And, again, shouting out to the people in their 30s that need to be forewarned, because you don't want to be blindsided. And I do feel like this is a conversation that we're not having enough with people before they get to perimenopause. It's like forewarned, forearmed, educated, and just have your antenna available for the things that can change. So this guide is 55 pages, as I said. It includes what you can expect in perimenopause and the biology behind the changes. So for me, I'm a big why learner. So if I understand why something's happening in my body, I feel at a greater sense of peace around it. I've also included those back to basic self-care anchors, which allow us to navigate this roller coaster with a little bit more of a stable foundation. Or the way that I'm thinking about self-care at the moment for me is perimenopause can be a stormy sea. And for others, and for other times, for even those that experience stormy seas, there can be plain sailing, right? If we take our sailing analogy all the way to the end, what the self-care anchors do is gives you a deeper keel of stability to cut through the buffeting around the stormy seas, the lightning, the thunder, the whatever of perimenopause. Again, I will say I'm not for 1 minute saying that these holistic health self-care anchors are going to prevent perimenopause symptoms. What I am saying is that they will give you a more solid foundation and will give you the filter of having more self-compassion if you do end up with the trickier symptoms, which I've been talking about in this episode. I've also included the bullshit stories which stop us taking care of ourselves in these ways. And I talk about the most commonly said phrase to me when I'm working with clients is, I just don't feel like myself anymore. So one of the things that I've included in this guide is how to settle into a more gentle and more self-compassionate attitude towards ourselves. And a big part of that is looking at the stories we have about who we need to be in the world. And I would really, really encourage you to try and emphasize the reframe of perimenopause being an invitation to zoom out, to have an eagle eye view of the way that you're investing your precious resources. And those are your love, your energy, your attention, your time. To be really clear on how much you can spend, because there is very, very commonly a feeling of having, a lot of things colliding. So less energy, less care factor, or zero fucks to give, as I often say. But also you've got a lower tolerance for bullshit. So you might be looking at your life and all of a sudden be like, I'm not fucking doing that anymore. What the hell was I thinking? But instead of making yourself wrong for that, or instead of sort of saying, I can't juggle the balls anymore, there's something wrong with me, try and emphasize the lens of perimenopause being this perfect time to be doing a life edit. Let's do a life edit. So for me, this dark night of the soul period has really, really hammered home a couple of things. My self-care, now more than ever, it always has needed to be non-negotiable, but now more than ever, it must be non-negotiable. And I've come to understand that the impact of my perimenopause, particularly on my mental landscape, is a perfectly timed invitation to deeper self-compassion and a gentler way of being. So being honest with ourselves and our loved ones about what we really can and really can't deliver on, and being okay with that. And let's all keep in mind that no matter what your experience with perimenopause, for the vast majority of people, not everyone, on the other side of menopause, and menopause being 365 days since your last bleed, on the other side of menopause, your perimenopause symptoms do tend to decrease and do tend to come to a much lower level. Not for everyone, but one of the things that I would like to do with this podcast is begin to talk to more people on the other side. So for those of us that are in the messy, magical middle, that we get reminded that the best is yet to come. And Mother Nature knows what she's doing. Mother Nature bloody well knows what she's doing. Far out. If you haven't actually listened to, it's the last episode before this one with Dr. Sarah Mackay, that was a huge episode for me for understanding that the biology of all of these changes, like everything else in our bodies, when we allow ourselves to go through the natural rites of passage, we've gone through puberty and we absolutely expect that our bodies and our mental landscape will change during puberty. We know that happens. We know if we've become parents or become a mum, that also changes our biology and our psychological lens and the way that our brains work. And now we also know more and more that the same level of change, the same transition that Mother Nature has perfectly designed happens during perimenopause. So it's not this midlife crisis time. It's not a horrible thing to have to go through, although, again, honoring the fact that, a lot of us can have very life-altering symptoms. And again, please seek professional support if that is you. And also, let's reframe the fact that we're in the messy, magical middle of a metamorphosis. And it is how it's meant to be. There is a lot of holistic health, self-care things that you can do to help yourself. There's a lot of different treatments for menopause. I actually didn't realize, because I didn't watch the Super Bowl, but I saw something on social media from Dr. Jen Gunther. I hope I'm saying that name. Gunther, I think she is. And she has, she's got such great energy. I love her on social media. I'll link to her in the show notes as well. But she was talking about that there was a menopause or perimenopause ad on the Super Bowl. And I was like, fuck yes. Yes, we need to be having these conversations. Just as it's super simple to see, or super acceptable these days to see, I don't know, say a pregnancy ad on that talks about supplementation to support conception, or I saw last night on TV one that's talking about preventing fetal alcohol syndrome. So in Australia, so this is funny, back in the 80s, my mum worked in a midwifery ward. And I remember back in those days, they used to have this horrible video, which was very necessary, about the damage to your fetus when you drink through your pregnancy. Now, that's only, that's 40 years ago. Now we have ads saying, as soon as you start trying for a baby, the answer to do you want to drink is a no. So that's how fast our awareness around, taking care of our bodies and our babies during that rite of passage. So let's start talking more and more about this perimenopause journey, and let's start being more and more honest if we are struggling, to normalize the fact that there's so many different experiences, and also to make sure that we are wrapping ourselves with the support that we so badly need, to know that we're not alone, that we're not the only ones struggling, that there is support, there is treatment available should you decide to do that. And there's also a lot of growing research being done around perimenopause, and also growing resources available or readily available to us. On that note, part of what I linked to in this amazing guide that I highly recommend you go and get and anchor in your self-care, I've also included a link to a growing resource page that I have been building. Every time I come across an amazing guest, an amazing book, a course, someone who has specific expertise like nutrition during perimenopause, or taking care of strength training during perimenopause and beyond, I'm building a page that links to them specifically. So if you, like me, are in the messy, magical middle, or if you've got people around you that are in their 30s, or I don't know, if you're a mum listening to this and you just want to start talking to your daughters about what they can expect, even if they're in their 20s or 30s, we need to start having these conversations. So I really hope, and my intention behind this guide that I've built about Delicious Midlife is to build awareness about what is in our control around supporting ourselves, and what to expect, and when we really need to get external help. It's also got a really, really simple way of self-assessing how nourished you feel right now. And I find that for a lot of people, that visual representation is really helpful. So you will find this Stand Tall and Stake a Claim on Your Delicious Midlife Back to Basics guide, big title again, on the podcast website at kyliepatchett.com.au under free gifts. Or you can actually see this in the show notes as well. So thank you for listening. I really do hope sharing my own personal journey is of service to you. I know that I don't know who's listening to this, but I am very strong in my intention that the community of people that listen to this podcast are heart-based women who want to be empowered and educated and inspired by sharing our stories. And so I truly believe that I'm speaking into a safe space. And equally, I really, really hope that you'll download the guide and you'll just take a little look at whether you've been neglecting any of your basic human needs, because it's so important. I always think every Saturday I have this routine of watering my houseplants because in years gone by, I used to kill plants all the time because I used to forget to water them. So I've got a routine Saturday, and I get this plant food called We Are Wild, and I use the magic water, which is water with the plant food in it, and I water them and I tell them they're beautiful, and I make sure they're getting enough light. make sure they've got somewhere to grow to, because a lot of my plants are growing plants. If you've ever seen me give a webinar or anything where you can see behind me, you'll see my wall of plants. And every time I water them on a Saturday, I notice how much more lush and happy and stand-uppy they look. And every time I do that, I think this is what self-care is to us. It's making sure that we get the basics of, living a purposeful life and having a positive mindset and deeply connected relationships with people, taking time out, making sure we're being self-compassionate. So all of those things are requirements for us to feel as healthy as my houseplants. So yeah, from me to you, may you learn your basic human needs. May you listen and respond. And yeah, if you're struggling in the messy middle, just know you're not alone. And I really hope that this guide really helps to cement some understanding and clarity for you and helps you on your journey. So have a beautiful day. It's hot again here in Queensland, 37 again today. You've got to love February in Queensland. So sending you some warmth if you need it. And if you can send me some cool if you're in a cooler place, that would be wonderful. All right, my loves. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for tuning into another episode, and I trust you're walking away with inspiration, aha, maybe some chiropractic adjustments of the soul where you've realized perhaps some ways that you're getting in your own way, or something that needs to be healed, or something that's calling to you that your heart really, really wants to birth or create or step into in this second cycle of life. And if that's you, I am throwing my arms wide open and inviting you to check out all of the ways that we could potentially partner together at kyliepatchett.com.au. That's my website for the podcast, and also one-on-one and group programs in midlife mentorship, yoga and breath work in specifically designed menopause classes online, and also super excitingly, a list of retreats around Australia that I have been blessed to partner with some pretty darn spectacular humans who also help midlife mavens through this transition point. So if you are looking for some support, some community, some tools, just a safe place to actually reconnect to who you are, what you want, and come home to your own power and magnificence, I would love to welcome you into any one of those containers. So head on over to kyliepatchett.com.au and I will be back in your ears very, very soon.